That's with attrition though. So with our anticipated attrition and those that are in training, with the 820 we have today, we project December 31st we'll have 868. So we'll actually be a little bit over.
Because we're authorized at what? I lost that number.
862.
862. Okay. So, and today we have 820.
Well, we
on
have
the street,
820 on the street, and then
street.
the other 56 or whatever.
Okay.
Training.
So already we're going to see probably, anyway, that's a lot.
So, that brings up a really good point in the conversations that I've had with many is, in order for us to maintain the staffing levels of what you see, if it's 878 or 862, whatever we're authorized, if we want those numbers on the street, that means we have to have a buffer for those that are in training. So we're not just looking at numbers of 862 or 878 and we have 50 or 60 in training and the rest not on the street. So what I'm trying to do is maintain staffing levels at the number we're authorized on the street.
And then last question. So, and then what is the number now that we're starting to see in terms of, I know you do projections of attrition. So what's our projected attrition for 2017, which really relates to kind of what are we trying to get through the system in terms of training and hiring?
Okay.
45.
I'm just these are all on the slides, but you ask them in better orders.
Mr. Chair, Council Vice President Glidden, our attrition, we're anticipating this year, right now we're at about 34. We're anticipating attrition of 45, and we're also expecting attrition next year of 45. As you know, a couple of years ago, we had pension plan change. Up until that time, we had a pretty consistent attrition of right around, I'd say an average of 30 to 32 a year. And then we had obviously that huge year because of the pension plan change. We anticipated being lower, actually. If we go back to the 2015 budget, we actually anticipated a lower attrition rate this year, but we're seeing elevated attrition rates compared to what our expectation was. We think that will continue into next year.
I don't know what it is. That's okay. If I could just add, there's a couple other things I wanted to mention that are also, I think, highlight the need for people on the street, but also reflective of the increase in costs, and that is burnout and injury. Officers are they're getting more and more injured. Our disabilities, our permanent disabilities are going up. PTSD is increased, and we're losing officers to that. We have an inability to fill some of our overtime shifts because they're tired, and those are optional. And it's my balance with how much I want people to be working as well, because when people are working too much, they become stressed out, they become short-tempered, and it creates a plethora of issues. And so this is a constant balance we have to have with what amount of resources is adequate and what kind of impact it's having on people. And so first and foremost, I go back to the preservation of life for the people in this community. And the second has to be the health and welfare of our employees. Current staffing levels, that's a hard chart to read, but I will just say in 2015, I'm going to give you some numbers. We had 106 people in the first precinct, 88 in second, 107 in third, 120 in fourth precinct, and 93 in the fifth precinct. We are now up by 10 in the first precinct to 116. We have 97 in the second precinct, which is up, but that includes K9. We're up by 2 in the third precinct at 109. We're up by 11 from 2015 in the fourth precinct with 131. And we're down 1 in the fifth precinct. So on average on the street in 2015, we had about 839, and averages of people enroll, I should say not on the street, but enroll in 2016, we have 852. So we're trying to maintain those levels on the street because that is it really is our greatest need and challenge. it's hard for me to argue that otherwise when violent crime is at the level it is, frankly, and the number of shootings we have.
Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure this is the exact right time to ask this, but since you just made that point, I wanted to ask you because I've had many thoughtful discussions with you about the role of policing in our city and its role in kind of addressing a lot of these big issues like violent crime, like homelessness, kind of the interweaving of poverty and crime. And I wondered if you could just take a minute to step back and talk about your perspective on responding to violent crime by increasing officers as proposed in this budget, and how that ties into upstream preventions that I know that you're engaged in a lot of ways throughout the enterprise and in different roles in the community. It's a little bit of a philosophical question perhaps, but I think it's appropriate to maybe take a step back at that policy level as we look at the details of adding pretty significant increases in the police department's budget to really put it in that context.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Bender, and if you want to go forward to, there's another slide on crime and the one with the staff there. Okay. If you go to 23, and I'll do more of my thoughts on it, but if you go to slide 23, you can also see staffing in correlation with Part 1 crimes. And so I think what we have to have is I see police officers, frankly, in a multitude of roles, but first and foremost, it's the visibility, it's connecting the community, it's on the front line. And so we have to have officers have the ability, if we're going to prevent crime, because that's something we can do too. We don't want to just be report takers, and we don't want to be just responding to crime. So if we want to be able to prevent crime, we have to do things and be out there not answering 911 calls. That also is the greatest impact and challenge we have when it comes to building public trust. One of the number one complaints I get is I only see an officer at the scene of a crime, or they're always going somewhere and they don't say hi to me, or people want engagement. If officers are only running to 911 calls, they don't have an opportunity to engage with people. And so we're trying to strike that balance where you have an officer who can actually spend time to communicate. That not only helps prevent crime because they see you, they get to know you. I'm trying to bring a suburban feel to an urban department where I actually will know you as Lisa. I will know you as officer so-and-so, and you're not just a number. The reason why some suburban departments have a different relationship with their officers is because their officers have time to do that. And I want our officers to have time to do that. I want our officers to have time to connect with the community. We are also the first point of contact. And so the co-responder program or the domestic assault stuff that we do, or the things that we do with homelessness, we're not the ones to fix homelessness, but we are the ones who are in contact with these people who should be connecting them with the resources that can get them the help, that deal with things in a long-term solution. If we continue to just make arrests, we are going to be here 20 years from now. So, but this is a systemic and a system-wide change that needs to occur. We are one piece of the puzzle. And we need to make sure visibly, everybody knows they see an officer in uniform, they know to go to them. People know to call 911, but they don't know where the other services are. They don't know who to go to. And I see us having a viable role in that. We have to have the ability to maintain livability crimes and some of those other street crimes that are occurring, and the ability to stop people to prevent something else from occurring. I can't tell you how many crimes don't occur, but I can tell you, as challenging as things are, I have no doubt if it wasn't for all the things we were doing today, it would be worse. We would be like some other cities across this country. And our crime prevention specialists and all the initiatives and the work we have done over the years has really helped in that area. That's just the high level, because I can go on for a really long time. I appreciate the question.
Chief, we also have a question from Councilmember Frye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief Harteau. Could you go back to the slide that referenced levels in each respective precinct? There we go. So now I could be wrong, but it looks like at least in 3 of the precincts, levels in 2010, when our population was less than it is today, were so in 2010, when our population was less, our police officer force, at least in 3 of those several precincts, were greater. is this due to attrition? Is this due to moving officers around? Is this due to the change in the pension plan? What overall do you attribute that to?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Fry, I think those were authorized strength numbers. And if we go to the slide that I had up that showed the crime with the next one. There, that one. That is 23. So as you can see, in 2008 and 2009, we had the largest increase in staff at 887 and 894, and the largest decrease in crime, which is what I was trying to illustrate.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So there's a direct correlation with the amount of staff we have. We have to look at 911 calls. So as resources get less, we still have an increase in 911 calls. And then what are those calls? Because they're not all created equal, and some take more time than others. Right? So a violent crime or a homicide will take you more time and remove officers from the street. So that's why I look at that. Now, there's obviously a balance, but you need a certain level. And I think when we start getting to those lower levels, when you saw the 794, 792 in 2004 and 2005, crime really spiked. We were at our highest in 5 and 6. We were simply being call takers. We were simply running from call to call and having no opportunity to do any proactive work, whether it's community engagement, proactive stops, to try to prevent crime.
Yep.
And we have to be able to have that.
That makes all the sense in the world. Are there statistics or theories linking the population growth to how many officers that you would or should have?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Fry, unfortunately, there aren't any to that level. I've looked, and it really depends upon all kinds of things, the demographics. And like I said, we've got uptown, Dinkytown, and downtown. So, yeah, there's population growth. But when I look at some comparison cities, there's, even if I look to Milwaukee, they have over almost 1,900 officers.
Yeah.
Their population is 150,000 more than ours, I think. They're more than double in the size of their department.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to let you know I have to leave to attend the League of Minnesota Cities Board meeting. I'm the city's representative. I just really want to say thank you for the presentation, the amount of time you've taken to really think through your responses. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to do it. All right, where were we?
Well, I
do
don't
we have
know.
more questions?
Well, let's start with one more. How about
Okay.
Councilmember Palmisano?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, on slide 23 that we were talking about before with the direct correlation between sworn staffing, those staffing numbers, which I know are always in flux, did those include cadets and recruits for that given year? Those are in roll at a certain consistent point of the year, like in June or something?
I can't tell you what the date was, but it is consistent.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Let's look at overtime, unless there's questions. What number is that? 21. So as you can see, the majority of our increase in 2016 is in patrol. We are currently 1.1 million over budget year to date in the general fund. That makeup is mostly due to, we certainly had significant events and protest costs last year, $300,000 this year. But as a result of incidents that occurred last year, that when the rulings came out in May, and we had subsequent incidents and things that we had to address. So we had $300,000 on that. And then staffing shortages, so that increased us at about $700,000, of which $200,000 was during the period of just over a couple week period, really, when the ruling came out from the officer involved shooting from November of last year. And about $400,000 of support for the 4th Precinct to backfill in those positions from May until September. So I just want to note, because there's always a question on overtime, and I want you to know that officers don't just get to self-report on overtime and just decide to show up for overtime. That we look at that very closely. We have minimums on the street, and so we make sure that we maintain our minimums, but we give inspectors the authority to, if it's a Monday and you go down by 2, you don't have to buy those 2 slots back. But there might be something going on and you have to do that. So we give that authority to them, but we do monitor that to make sure that happens. You have to get a supervisor's, they have to approve your overtime, and we're constantly scrutinizing it. The flip side of that is I am not going to risk what events on the street to have people run too short, to risk injury to officers or risk the safety of the citizens. And so we've really had to strike a balance, but we have been trying to manage through many, many critical events, large-scale events, some of them all at the same time, with a smaller number of officers. And so that is constantly a balance for us. But that is really what's reflective of most of our overage this year. And it's just a struggle we have.
It is. Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Chief, you mentioned this earlier that, and we hear this across the board too, that I remember it actually from employee surveys that the younger people that we're hiring aren't perhaps as interested in taking overtime as some of people who, in years past were, the older generation is more interested in overtime. Yes. Does that impact those numbers? And I guess my curiosity goes to how, if this is a trend, and we hear it again across our employee survey, people value their time off perhaps more than they did years ago. How do we accommodate that then in staffing, and how do we deal with that going forward if we're in a hiring phase and where we have a lot of newer officers and our age is going down and all that sort of thing?
Mr. Chair, Council President Johnson, this is where it's a balance. So the overtime shifts aren't being filled for 2 reasons. One, it's yes, I've already worked a lot, so I'd like to not work more, and I'd like to see my family. Or they're going to be the next people we have to respond to, right? Domestics and other things. And 2, others are just burnt out. They're working overtime, but they can't do it anymore. And so we have burnout. So that's why we need to strike a balance with an increase in staffing size to accommodate, because we're sending mixed messages to people. We're telling them, we want you to have a balance in your life so you can be a productive police officer and be able to be on your game when you're at work, but we want you to work more than the hours in our policy that says you can work, right? So that's a balance. I mean, we do have a policy. You shouldn't be working more than 64 hours in a week, and that's already a lot of time. And so we do need to make sure that we have enough. There are times where overtime is the right thing to do, that it costs us less to pay overtime to have the people on the street because we're not paying pension, all the additional costs, right, of hiring an additional person. But the flip side is we have to make sure that we maintain a certain level. And I think we're getting closer to understanding what that level is based on today, based on what's going on in the city, based on the demographics, the increase in size in the city. So we're getting closer to understanding what that is. It's going to take us a while to get there, I think.
There are other uses for overtime. As I was having it explained to me once, is especially when we have a lot more officers in training.
Yes.
This is requiring a lot more driving and patrol. And then also we're asking them to be out on the street, get out and talk to people, go to community meetings. This is not part of their regular duty. So that's also something that we should consider as a value and an exchange that we're trying to make.
Mr. Chair and Council, that's absolutely correct. And so that is constantly looking at it, analyzing it, and striking that balance. As you know, we have a new early intervention system. And these are all things where we want people to be able to have a balance in their life. We don't want to overtax them, because once burnout hits, then there's other things that occur, and you'll have more complaints, whether it be language or force, anything. And so we really need to take care of the people that work for us. The other is special crimes. We're up $100,000 because we're up in juvenile crime, as in juvenile victims, we're seeing increases, and juvenile suspects across the board. You want I mentioned already our duty disabilities. We're projecting we'll have 9 by the end of the year. We went from 4 to 9. And so we're seeing that double. I talked a lot about the sworn staffing with crime rates, so I think we took care of that, unless anybody has any other questions. CSOs, and so we have a change of a little over $1 million. That includes the FTEs, the 15 FTEs, which is a 75, which at 75% time is 20 CSOs, because they cost about $55,000 annually in payroll, training, tuition reimbursement, and equipment. That's still our place where we get our largest amount of diversity. These funds will allow us to hire additional CSO class, so we can maintain 2 classes. Generally, we can do 1, so this will allow us to really do another class. And that helps us to build the workforce. So in the event we can hire quickly, if we need to adjust, that's another group of people we can pull from. And I have done it for the last year, to interview everybody that walks in the door, whether they're CSOs, recruits, or cadets. It's a huge undertaking, but I think we are really, it allows me to have a conversation to understand their rationale thinking, what being a police officer means to them, what the role of a police officer is. I can talk a little bit about my own expectations and see if that's the right fit. And I will tell you that some people that look good on paper aren't so good when you meet them. And then there's others who we are not sure about. And then you get to have a conversation with them, and it's just, it's the right fit. I get to see a lot of things when I meet them in person. It's very enlightening, and it helps us, I think, too. And are we attracting the right people? Are we doing, it's just very insightful for me on a multitude of levels, but I think we're getting a whole better quality of folks. So I think it's more than worth the investment of my time to do so.
Councilmember Bender had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noted in the earlier slides that you anticipated a lot of the new sworn officers would be coming out of the CSO classes, which I think speaks to the success of the program. Do you know how many CSOs have been hired as sworn officers since we started investing in those larger classes?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Bender, that's a great question. We should know, but
I'd love to know that as well.
And I'll tell you, I like to hear when people say, they were explorers. I hear from people, the reason why I'm here is because my SRO said I would make a really good police officer. So it's really good to see those things as well in that process. But that's really great. I would imagine the number is pretty significant. And then there's nothing else on that. Administration and training, we've listed just a snapshot of the things that we've done. As you know, we've had a considerable amount of officers go through training. One of the things that's not on there is de-escalation training, because that's just part of our in-service, but it's infused in that. We've been doing de-escalation for quite a while, but obviously we have implemented the majority of PERF's recommendations on use of force. On the board of the Police Executive Research Forum, we've been at the table from the beginning. And so our officers have been trained in those, just looking at things a little differently, providing them new tools and ways to allow them to slow down if needed, if able. And so there's just all kinds of things that we've been able to do. Our procedural justice training, we're going to have 100% completion of all the officers by the end of the year, and that was 3 modules. That's huge. Fair and impartial policing, we've already done. Our body camera training, as I said earlier, 5th Precinct was the last precinct to get body cameras. They have them now as of yesterday. So all of patrol is equipped with body cameras. And we have managed to do quite a bit of training and accomplished a lot this year. I don't know if anybody has any questions about anything specific, but and then there's some of our 2017 plans. Also, we did complete the crisis intervention, additional 40 hours for every officer versus just our CIT officers.
Is the additional money we put in last year's budget related to training, accelerated training program, was that used for mostly overtime coverage to attend the trainings, or was there additional curriculum or consultants to provide the training? Where did that money come from and go to?
Mr. Chair, I know that's an additional curriculum. I'm not sure how we set that in the...
Mr. Chair, the money that was given last year went primarily to the CIT training. That was the majority of it, and that was actually for outside training to come in. So, and that has been used.
That's terrific. I'm pleased to do that. I was really happy to do that. But getting back to the issue of training, it comes at an expense. It takes an officer out off of the street and into the classroom, and that's an exchange we're making. But it is all. Are they on an overtime basis? We're in that situation, or is this part of their regular shift, or how do we capture that?
Mr. Chair and Council, that's part of their regular shift. They're assigned, but that means they're not working the street.
That's right.
And so sometimes the overtime comes in if there's people, sick time's another thing that's gone up a little bit. So, if we need extra bodies on the street, but what we try to do is make sure that when you do the schedule, that you see who's already gone to training, and then you say, we have this much minimum. So you end up having your whole shift work, but it'll have an implication later on in the month, because at some point in time, people have to have their appropriate number of days off. But for the most part, it is based on straight time. But we also have trainers who are training each other too. So we don't have a full staff of all the trainers we need. So when we have in-service or we add training, we have to take people from their permanent assignments and bring them into training to train. Example, our procedural justice. Those 5 or 6 people I permanently assigned there. Well, we did this training this year, but that took them out of their regular positions. So we had to put other people back there.
Yeah.
It's very complex. When it comes to MPD investigations, there's no MPD or no budget changes, reallocation. We had 71 FTEs last year. We have 68 this year, but it's actually the same because of some movement in the, which one is? Special crimes. Okay. So it's still the same numbers, but sometimes when you move them under a different umbrella, it changes so it looks differently. So when it comes to violent crimes, as you can see, this is the cases that were assigned. We are constantly looking with, how many investigators we have, how many cases are assigned, how many should be assigned, closure rates. We're still kind of managing somewhat of a flat, small decrease, but somewhat of a flat closure rate on most of our investigative practices. We do look at that quite frequently. I don't know if there's questions on that specifically. There are no changes in MPD criminal intelligence and analysis. You will see a reflection in the FTEs though from 31 to 26, but that's because reporting structure, we moved our gang unit that I created a couple of years ago under the community engagement umbrella. And that is more reporting, but also it does have some crossover with some of the people we come into contact with. The next slide is just information for you on what the intelligence arm looks like with things that come out of that. No change in special crimes. Some movement on just the reallocation on the FTEs from 94 to 97. The offset was by decrease in violent crime general funds, and that was just a head count. We moved with auto theft grant that we've had in the past, and so it was just kind of a structural realignment. And then this slide, especially on the right side with youth gunshot victims and then homicides occurring in Minneapolis, 24 and younger, as you see an increase in juveniles on both victims of gunshots and victims of homicides. But I would say you would also see that same increase on suspects. No change in cost to community engagement. Just some reallocation and movement.
Chief, is the crime prevention, you're about to say it. I was wondering, is that in the community engagement area?
Yep.
And in crime prevention specialists, is there Any openings, or are they all filled at this point? We have Council President Johnson maybe had a similar question.
Should I duck now?
Yeah. I think that's a good strategy.
What was the question?
Council President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, Chief, I've talked to you about this already, but, we have in North Minneapolis, we have 3 crime prevention specialists assigned, and one is has medical issues and is on leave. And it's just really intolerable to just have 2 crime prevention specialists for the busiest precinct in the city. So I just want to put a plug in again to fill that hole. I know, you've got a position and somebody's in it, but it's just, it's unmanageable for the 2 people that are doing a great job. Don't get me wrong, but it's just an overwhelming workload for them. Thank you.
Yep. Last are just our community engagement efforts, and there's been some increases over the years and just a build up on the many things that we've done, whether it be cops out of cars, the bike cops for kids. What's not on here is I created a police community support team, and these folks are comprised of our community members, our faith leaders, police officers, and when we have a critical incident in the city, homicide, a significant shooting, we call them and they respond to the scene, and they really help us with giving our community members and residents accurate information, explaining things because we tell them everything we can tell them so that they don't have to hear what the media decides to put out there, and they get real-time information on what actually has transpired. And so they can share that with their family members and friends. We also provide better support for impacted families of violent crime when we do that. So that's been an incredible addition to our team. They have ID, and they are definitely MPD members, and they go everywhere in the city. They're not just specific, and they're from every part of the city as well. So a lot of initiatives, a lot of engagement, and I'm very proud of that work and the officers that do it. And then cars. Then we're going to go to cars if you want.
Okay.
Do you want to kind of run through this a little bit? My resident expert.
Mr. Chair, council members, the cars, I just lost it now. Great. The cars requests this year are really in 3 different areas. The first one is an emergency response, and I don't think there's anything on here that's too new. The milestone, the safety camera system, is a continual replenishment maintenance each year. The dollar amount has come down slightly from prior years. The tactical vests and ballistic helmets are the ones that are worn by our SWAT group. They're just coming to the end of their useful life and need to be replaced from a safety standpoint. This next slide, on slide 42, the capital asset additions for really public safety really have to do with the mobile data computers in our squads. Again, those 2 are at the end of the useful life, and we're going through a replenishment process. In-squad video is the same. Those are replacements for the same reason. They're end of the useful life. In the case where they're at the end of the useful life, that really means that they're not supported, or we can't get technical support anymore. So it becomes very inefficient, expensive in order to replace and fix. And plus the technology is obviously significantly improved than when they were first implemented. The last item on there is CJIS compliance. CJIS, the criminal justice system has come up in order for us to access some of the databases. Now you need to have 2 points of basically verification. So this is to put that second point of verification on those computers that do have CJIS input or input to the databases that they run. The third one is the third page, the third number 43 is actually kind of one of the ones I'm really excited about is the Hamilton Training Lab. Because we are now back into a mode of having yearly multiple classes for training, we've determined that we have a real need for computer training because the officers do spend a lot of time on the computer. And plus now we also have post-training, which is being supplied to us by the League of Minnesota Cities, and that's online training. So the need for computerized type location facility has become much greater than what we currently have. I think we currently have 10 computers. So what we've proposed is actually putting in a computer lab within Hamilton, though that could be really any place throughout the city, and then allowing, once our new record management system is up and running, because that's a pretty significant training request right there, a requirement, is having that lab available throughout the city. And so this would be able to leverage the needs that we have with the needs that are within other departments. We would be willing and happy to manage that facility so that other departments have the benefit of a large training facility with the computers. I understand that there used to be one available many years ago that was taken out, but it looks like the need has been growing not only with the police department, with other departments as well. So, and then the gas mask fit testing is an OSHA requirement. So, any questions regarding cars?
Are any of these cars requests ongoing? I mean, finishing up or just starting, setting aside some for future use?
Thank you for asking. The the camera program is an ongoing replenishment. We do so many a year. Some of them get broken. Some of them it's strictly maintenance. So that is ongoing. The ballistic vests, I believe there's a 2-year process. Again, this is every 5 years these need to be turned around. So if you don't see them next year, you'll see them 4 years down the road.
Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Robin. As long as we have you here, Ms. McPherson. And just a visit with the chief and deputy chief last week, they mentioned that we have huge demand for our mobile cameras, and they're in the shop getting repaired sometimes. And yesterday, Inspector Jost, we were talking about going to a particular place, and he said the problem is you have to take it from someplace where it's needed as well. So, what does one of those mobile cameras cost?
Mr. Chair, Council President Johnson, I'm guessing here a little bit. The mobile ones I think are right around $35,000, $30,000 to $35,000.
Okay.
The fixed ones are $5,000. So it's a significant difference. We also have a problem right now, though, on capacity from our servers. So that's something that we're looking at as well, whether we expand the servers or whether we increase the number of servers. But that's approximately the cost for the two types of cameras.
Okay. Good.
And yes, I made the mistake, a little facetious here, but I made the mistake of asking how many people needed additional cameras, and it was quite a list.
As far as mobile cameras, you mean?
Yeah, from the inspectors. So
okay.
it's like,
okay.
All
right.
I think they thought she was making the offer.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So.
Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to piggyback on Council President Johnson's point there. Ms. McPherson, with regards to these cameras, whether they're mobile cameras or the fixed cameras, my understanding is also that maybe they're a little bit old and they, in some ways, need to be replaced completely just because of the obsoleteness of them. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that as well, and if we have any plans on the horizon about full replacement.
Mr. Chair, Council President Yang, they are old, and the cost for renovation or fixing these, the maintenance, does go up. At this point in time, though, I don't have enough information really to tell you at what point they would need to be replaced. I know that there's a feeling now that they can continue replacing, but I'm sure the day is coming when that will no longer happen, and that's probably sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you.
Seems to be a popular theme on these cameras. I just had a meeting with our inspector out on in the 3rd precinct, and we saying, boy, it'd be great if we could get a couple more right in this location. And she said, yeah, everybody wants that. They're very hard to get, and in fact, sometimes they're damaged as well, so it's not even all in circulation. So it's a popular theme, so appreciate the comments.
Thank you. So that actually concludes our presentation. Happy to answer questions. I do want to just make a couple of closing comments. One, we constantly, and I've said it a few times today, evaluate efficiency and effectiveness in everything that we do, making sure we have the balance in how we operate. There is a cost and a cost at times. And so we know that if it means a cost in dollars and the cost to the public is greater, we'll make that decision to spend the cost in dollars, and I know you all would support that. And so I do appreciate that. And I do have to thank Robin. This is a very complex budget, and it's ever changing, and it's constantly moving around, and she does a phenomenal job of keeping it all in order for me and my team. With that, I thank you, and I will answer any other questions.
Well, good. Not seeing any. I do want. Oh,
Excellent.
I'm sorry. Councilmember Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Health Department's budget includes several items that are either one-time or ongoing funding related to work on youth violence prevention, group violence prevention, and other sort of related items. And I wondered if you had been engaged in developing those proposals, since it's been split in these two departments, but I think the topic is very relevant to a lot of what you discussed today. And I wondered if you could comment on those proposals that came through the Health Department's presentation separately.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Bender, yeah, we work very closely with the Health Department. As a matter of fact, Deputy Chief Volkins works with them on these projects, the blueprint and all the things that we're doing with youth violence. We have to have that component of it along with the enforcement piece. And so, yeah, we're right there with them, and most things that we're all very intertwined, and I think that it's just laid out in budgets that make the most sense given where they're housed. But the work itself and how we're trying to get there is more collectively.
Well, good. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, council member colleagues, for a robust conversation.
Great
And
questions.
Appreciate that very much. If people had additional questions, I'm sure the chief and Ms. McPherson would be able to answer them separately, and then we'll have the results shared with the rest of the council members through Ms. Green. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our budget committee will reconvene at 1 o'clock, where we'll take up the fire department budget. So until then, we'll see you at 1 o'clock. Thank you.